Now on the last little piece of the reproductive system lecture, we've already talked about the male and the female reproductive system, which leads us to pregnancy here. So for this, I just want to do just a little bit of basics about the embryology, so the development. So again, just the very basics here. Let's start with this first word, zygote. A zygote is just a fertilized egg, which just means that the sperm has penetrated the egg, it's dropped off the DNA, so we have the genetic material still in there. That is a zygote. Okay, so just a fertilized egg. From there, the zygote will begin to divide. And this is an interesting type of division because usually when you have a cell that is dividing, so think of like the cell life that we talked about way long ago, you have the cell divide and then it grows before it divides again. For this though, what we're really interested in is just making more of the cells. And so the cell divides and then divides and then divides without the growth periods in between. So what you end up with is just a ball of cells, and those cells become smaller and smaller and smaller. And the reason for that is because now we have got the building blocks to start creating structures. Okay, so this right here that's called a blastocyst. And then from there, we start to get differentiation, which just means that the cells begin specializing in a particular structure and function. Okay, so whenever you have this indent here, that's now called gastrula. We're now in the process of creating specific structures from those cells, which I like to think of as building blocks. Okay, so right around week 6, okay, so middle of week 6-ish, that's when we first start to hear the heartbeat. Okay, so heartbeat beginning around week 6, which means we have, the very beginnings of our circulatory system. And then at the end of week 8, we now have it, developed enough of the structures developed, and it changes its name to a fetus. Okay, so about week 8, we now have our fetus, and then it's going to be continued to call fetus until it is born. And the typical gestation period for humans is about 40 weeks long. Okay, so think about that. They always say 9 months, but really it's more like 9.5, almost 10 months. Okay, about 40 weeks long here. And at that point, it'll be born. Okay, so let's talk about the process of fertilization and implantation. So here we have the ovary, and the ovary will ovulate an oocyte, which is the fancy way to say egg. So ovulation just means it spits the oocyte out. And the oocyte will be those fimbriae on the uterine tubes will draw the oocyte into the uterine tube. Now, the uterine tube is the site where the fertilization usually happens most of the time. So think about what the sperm had to do to get there. They came up through the vagina, through the cervix, through the uterus, through the uterine tube, and then encountered the egg, and that's where you get the fertilization. After the sperm has penetrated the egg, now we have our zygote, okay, our fertilized egg, our zygote. The zygote begins to divide and divide and divide. So we got our ball of cells. And then the embryo will continue to travel. Remember that the uterine tubes are lined with cilia, and the cilia beat and create currents that help move the embryo along. And then the embryo will finally reach the uterus and embed itself into the endometrium of the uterus, hopefully in the body of the uterus. That's the best place. And then once it embeds itself, the endometrium has glands and a lot of blood vessels in there that'll help nourish it until it can create the placenta. Now, the placenta is a mixture of maternal and fetal and maternal tissues. They kind of combine together. So we have the chorion from the fetus and the maternal of the endometrium kind of coming together and creating the placenta. So the major function of the placenta basically just acts as the blood supply for the fetus, right? So it provides nutrients and oxygen. It also takes away waste products like urea, as well as carbon dioxide. Okay, so it's mostly the blood supply. Although it does have a function that's not listed here, but you might want to hear about anyways, and that the placenta also produces progesterone, which is a hormone that helps to maintain the pregnancy. Okay, so you do not need to know that for this class, but you might hear it later on, so it's good to have already heard it. Okay, so here is the placenta. Okay, so I do want to talk really quickly a little bit more because I get a lot of confusion about what the placenta is. A lot of people kind of get it confused with the amniotic sac. Okay, so the placenta, here's the placenta. It's like a disc-shaped structure that's going to be embedded and kind of stuck on the uterine wall. Okay, the thing that surrounds the baby, okay, kind of where the amniotic fluid is, surrounds that, that's the amniotic sac. So the placenta itself does not surround the fetus. That's called the amniotic sac. The placenta is just going to be stuck on one of the sides of the uterus, okay, sort of really embedded in there. So after, for birth, the amniotic sac will rupture. That's when the water comes out. You know, for those of you who've given birth, it's a lot of water, and that's gonna that'll drain out, and then the baby will come out. And so the placenta is sometimes called the afterbirth because it actually has to be kind of torn off, kind of taken off of the wall of the uterus, and then it'll come out after the baby is born. Honestly, though, I was so tired, I don't even remember it coming off ever. I have no recollection of that at all. So that's the placenta. Let's talk about the mammary glands. So here is the pectoralis major muscle, right? There's a muscle right there. Now the mammary glands begin to develop during puberty. That's why your breasts grow. We also have a larger deposit of fat in there, okay? But they actually do not fully develop until you are pregnant and give birth. Okay, so the process of giving birth, you got a lot of oxytocin in there. That's when they actually fully finish developing. So if you've never been pregnant, they're not going to be ever fully finished developing. And during the birth process, because of the changes in hormones, then they're going to start produce the milk. Okay, so the mammary glands are divided up into these lobes, these lobules. Okay, those right there, they produce the milk. And then the milk is going to be kind of drained into the lactiferous ducts, okay, lactiferous ducts, which will enlarge into the lactiferous sinuses, and then they're going to come out from the nipple. Now, also you should know that the area surrounding the nipple, the darker skin part surrounding the nipple, that's called the areola. Okay, that's about it. What was the name of a fertilized egg? Starts with a Z. That's zygote. That's it. We made it through. Woohoo!